Sandip, Director of Students Welfare, Sandip University, Professor Arif Mansoori, respected deans of various schools of Sandip University, faculty members, and all my dear friends. Today, we have gathered here to gain knowledge and listen to one of the legal luminaries in the field of law, and Director, Symbiosis School of Law. To welcome her gracious presence, I request Honorable Vice Chancellor of Sandip University, Colonel Dr. N. Ramachandran, to felicitate our today's chief guest.
At the outset, I welcome you all in this second lecture organized by School of Law, Sandip University. Right from inception, Sandip University is trying to imbibe a student-centric, value-based education, and so as to make accustomed to the students about the professional dynamism of legal professions, we have decided to organize the guest lecture series of legal luminaries. And accordingly, we have invited honorable judges of Supreme Court, High Court, and legal academia across the country. As a part of it, today we have invited Dr. Shashikala Gurpur, member of 19th Law Commission of India. Dear student, today she will be dealing with the topic human rights in the era of science and technology. As a student of law, we are aware about that the human rights are the inalienable rights of the human beings, without which the human being cannot live a sustainable life. The Indian Constitution, which is the mother of all the laws, in its Article 21 of the Constitution of India, ensures right to life and liberty. The Supreme Court of India, while playing a very pivotal role in shaping the democracy and upholding the rule of law in the country, has evolved the jurisprudence of the human right. Dear friends, the technology and the development in science is always meant for constructive purposes and not for destructive purposes. The science and technology which has recently developed, it has many legal, social and ethical intricacies, because very recently the use of chemical weapons by Syria, wherein the Syrian existing government used the chemical weapons against their own civilians, which raised the questions before the messiahs of the human rights. Many technologies has been evolved, introduced for the betterment of the human life, for peaceful society and just and sustainable society. But the techniques like narco-analysis, the techniques like DNA testing, fingerprinting, narco-analysis, etc. are introduced for betterment of the society, investigations of the crime, and make a peaceful society. Similarly, it has many implications, and directly or indirectly, it violates the right of the citizens, more particularly the accused person. India is one of the prominent destinations for the clinical trials. Whenever the manufactured pharmaceutical products introduced in the market, it needs to be undergo through different kinds of trials. But considering the cheap cost involved in processing in India, India becomes a top destination of clinical trials. When the poor target groups, their right to health and life is at the stake, there needs to be taken into consideration seeking the balance in between the human rights and the development. Same is the case with the environment also. No doubt, for the development of the nations, economic growth of the nations, there has to be industry as a base. But the industry and industrialization base should not be at the cost of environment. We need to seek the balance in between the environmental protections and human rights, along with industrialization as a base of the economy. Accordingly, India is a developing nation. It is one of the largest democracy in the world. We have accepted sustainable development as a part of our jurisprudence. Dear friends, in brief, we are victims of technology. We are victims of science and technology. This science and technology needs to be used for constructive purposes, betterment of the society, peaceful society, and whenever there is a violation, direct or indirect violation of the rights, more particularly human rights, there needs to be the equilibrium and balance in between development of the science and human rights. To talk much about deep into details about this particular aspect, we have with us a very learned, great academicians of country, because very recently a top list of academicians, jurists was declared, and almost only 3 females are there, 3 women are there in this particular list, and Dr. Shashikala Gurpur is one among such top jurists of the country. On behalf of Sandip University School of Law, on behalf of Sandip University, I express deep sense of gratitude to Madam for accepting our invitations and making it great convenient to come over here and deliver the lectures on this topic, emerging rights in the era of science and technology. Once again, I thank you all.
Today, we are pleased to welcome Dr. Shashikala Gurpur, a very special guest. Dr. Shashikala Gurpur is a Fulbright Scholar of United States of America and a distinguished academician at Par Excellence. She completed her graduation in Bachelor of Science and later LLM with gold medal. She holds PhD in International Law from Mysore University, Karnataka. She was honored with Youth Award as well as a gold medal for securing highest number of marks in LLM. She was HRD Visiting Fellow of Edinburgh Law School 2004. She has ample experience of teaching and administration of national law universities of Ireland Cork, Manipal University and Symbiosis School of Law. Now presently, Dr. Shashikala Gurpur is working as a Dean and Director of Symbiosis Law School, Pune. She is a recipient of many awards like Legal Education Innovation Award and Best Law Teacher Award. She has to her credit many articles and books and has presented papers at national and international conferences. It is a matter of pride that she is one of the 3 women out of 100 eminent jurists of the country. She also works as the member of 19th Law Commission of India and is also the member of Bar Council of India. And with this, I request Honorable Ma'am to guide us on today's topic, that is emerging human rights in the era of science and technology.
Good morning, respected Vice Chancellor, sir, respected office bearers and leadership team of Sandip University, and my dear friend and colleague, Dean Dhanuji Zadav, other colleagues from the law faculty, and dear students from across different faculties. A very good morning to all of you. Say that. That's nice. So we convert this into a short classroom, short duration classroom, because all teachers have this addictive habits. The moment we get the mic, we get the podium, and the technology with us, we go eloquent. But I must tell you that that's not the claim that I have with you. I know that you students are from different disciplines, different specializations, and predominantly from pharmacy, from engineering, from management and law, I'm told. Maybe different hues and colors under each of the faculty, but these 4 predominant faculties have a lot of connotation for the theme that I'm going to discuss with you. I have designed the theme of emerging trends and rights into this title, Justice in Globalizing India. All of us agree that India is globalizing, or is it deglobalizing? When you are looking at localization, you may feel that we are coming out of the world of globalization. So we have a kind of love-hate relationship with globalization constantly. By about mid-90s, with the liberalization, privatization also started globalization, because liberalization and privatization meant opening your borders for investment and facilitating trans-border, means across the border, flow of people, goods and ideas. So that is the kind of generic situation that we have since 1995. We are almost a quarter of a century into globalization. So there is also a deglobalization phenomenon which we are seeing, whereby we used globalization to our question that has to be dealt with. But if you are evaluating globalizing in India, justice is one of the important yardsticks. Understanding you have, right? Okay. Now, science and technology. Most of you have an idea. All of us are living in a world which is dominated by science and technology. There was a world where science was considered at a time when it was considered as public good. It is something of a higher level of knowledge which is for the good of humankind. That was the understanding of science. And technology is the application side of conceptual science, to put it in a simple way. How do we posit justice and rights in relation to science? So let me begin with the known and let me take you through the unknown. We know that United Nations organization is there at the global level. From your civic classes in high school, you must be familiar with it. And this is an organization which is having, as of now, about 192 member states. And states means governments or countries. In simple language, countries. For lawyers, it is states. So countries can become members by signing the charter and coming in as members. Now these states are the ones which are from time to time attending the conferences, entering into agreements, and these agreements are called conventions or conferences or treaties. So United Nations organization has got an arm called United Nations Development Program, which looks at common goal of protection of people's freedoms, rights and development. Now the idea of development there is not just acquisition of material goods, it is about comprehensive development, which means economic development, social development, cultural development, development in terms of acquisition of knowledge, science and technology. So how do we convert this idea of comprehensive human development into the idea of justice and into the idea of rights is the question that we have in mind. So United Nations organization from time to time puts up through UNDP a document called Development Goals. So Millennium Development Goals were put up at the turn of the century. They were evaluated. So in that United Nations Millennium Development Goals, one of the important facets was gender equality, another was poverty reduction. So they evaluated these goals, and at the turn of this last decade, I mean around 2015, United Nations passed replacing Millennium Development Goals after reviewing and evaluating, after monitoring its working across the world, that poverty has slightly reduced, wealth has increased, but this wealth has been concentrating 91% of the wealth in 9% of the people. So that's a skewed equation. So how can you have development when all the wealth of the world is in very few hands and there is a large mass of the world which is still lying poor? So they started this new idea called Sustainable Development Goals. So Millennium Development Goals led to Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainability, which is your Vice Chancellor's core area in terms of his specialization as well. What is this sustainability? Sustainability is about use of the present without compromising the needs of the future. So you can talk about the conflict between environment and development, which all of us as managers, as engineers, as technologists, as knowledge workers, as lawyers confront. You know, should I talk about constructing a huge university or a huge project by disturbing the environment, or how do I combine the concerns of environment with these mega projects? So that is the idea of sustainability. I hope you got it. So sustainable development goals are about keeping the development as sustainable in terms of not compromising the needs of the future and not losing sight of the skewed development model which has been emerging. So in sustainable development goals, which Prime Minister Modi was also privy to in the Paris Convention, was center staging two core issues. One is poverty, not reduction, poverty elimination, and second is wealth regulation. How do you, so regulating the rich. So between the two, you had to work out sustainable development goal, which meant that environment was the core concern. The resources of the earth, not just the environment, the natural resources, how justly, how equitably you distribute it, how you see that the benefit of development, namely wealth generation, is shared equitably. That you not only regulate wealth, but also you see that it is distributed according to the needs of those who deserve it, who have the demand. So this is where you see that science and technology are with its important innovative arm, namely the innovation, underpin virtually every goal. If you're talking about regulating well, you use e-technology. You use e-technology to check the well. You use e-technology to regulate, to impose taxes, to see who are the thieves who are evading taxes, those who are stashing money abroad. See how technology plays a role. The innovation in management technology, the innovation in finance regulation technology, technocratic regulation of human operations to bring in the objectivity, to bring in the neutrality, to bring in the vigilance, to handle large mass of transactions is made possible. So virtually it is science, technology and innovation which underpin every goal, whether it is Millennium Development Goal or it is Sustainable Development Goal. So do you understand the power of science and technology now? And do you understand the need for gearing the innovation to meet the human needs, unmet human needs, unmet justice needs of the world? So if you are looking at innovation as an answer to the problems, because what is the definition of innovation, you tell me? Innovation, I will be coming to the idea of innovation, but basically innovation is about novelty. It is about testability. It's about repeatability. But novelty or the so-called invention which has a value, which has a utility. So innovation has got these two-pronged important arms, something new but something of usefulness. So new and usefulness is hallmark of innovation, which is part and parcel of science and technology. Now if it is new, if it is useful, that means it is public good, it's going to bring good, it's going to bring happiness, therefore it is the right of everybody. So science and technology as such is a public good for which everybody should have access. The benefits of which should flow to everybody. Now how do you ensure that? What are the rights arguments for that? How ensuring that is going to impact on justice? Let us study that. So after we identify the power and the significance of innovation in science and technology, let's go to the next concept. What is this globalization? I already told you that globalization is about the world was divided into countries and there was borders which was limiting the flow between countries. So globalization was disappearance of these borders. There was trans-border flow which was visible. So this trans-border flow had to be made possible by integrating processes. So it is integrating of people, integrating of processes, integrating of countries, which meant that trans-border flow of trade or capital, money also, trans-border flow of ideas, trans-border flow of people, communication, media, cultural exchange and also imitation. I reckon mid-1995 when the privatization and liberalization were official in India. Before that, metro cities had access to Santa Barbara and other channels. And there was a lot of change in the way the students and youth dressed themselves. Young children had their demands in the malls. Malls started coming up. So new consumer needs were created. That means imitation is the hallmark of this trans-border flow. Where did we have the chudidar in India till the Greeks invaded, you know? So we always have this kind of rubbing of cultures. We call it as a dispersion and diasporic phenomenon in cultural analysis. So all these were indicative of the trans-border flow and disappearance of boundaries, the restriction that we had in the name of country. So globalization was characterized by these phenomena. Now for such trans-border flow, was it oneness of humankind, like how we say in Symbiosis, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, or world as one family, which the Vedic sages foresaw? Was it that ideal which was driving us, or the practicality of trade, practicality of migration of human beings, and organizing of the globe not as based on countries anymore, but as one global market? So global market society has been emerging. Because global market society has been emerging, those who are important economic actors, they have a participation, they have a say. But those who do not have such know-how, those who do not have such capability, they get excluded. So I was visiting Thailand in the early 2002. Thailand was just coming into the fold of WTO, World Trade Organization. We had a lot of indigenous manufacturers who would sell their stuff by the roadside. We could bargain a shoe for 100 rupees. we could bargain a good cloth which was homespun. By 2012 when I visited, everything was disappearing. There were huge malls, intimidating huge buildings, and within that there were multinational brands which were being sold. So market and finance become the driving force, and market society has been dictating terms where certain others get excluded. That means everything in globalization is not that rosy, not that just, not that fair, not that conforming to the rule of law, not that conforming to the concept of justice. Now, that will bring us to the question, then what is our understanding of justice? If this is happening and this is causing some disturbance to somebody's livelihood, what is my understanding of justice, and how my understanding of justice is going to be recast or rethought in the line of globalization? I hope till now the concepts are clear. Shall we move further? Okay, the next concept is about justice. What is justice? Justice is absence of injustice. That means that justice is indicative of peacefulness, a kind of equilibrium, non-disturbed kind of existence. In a non-undisturbed kind of existence, we are happy. We are able to achieve our life's purpose. We are able to make meaning out of our life, our relationship with nature, our relationship with fellow human beings, our ability to organize as a society in the form of family, in the form of organizations, educational institutions, etc. We are able to recreate, we are able to have family, we are able to have entertainment, we are able to progress into next level of whatever you call the moksha or the spiritual existence. Now justice is that kind of a conducive condition in the society which is indicated by equilibrium. Justice is therefore about doing no harm. Nobody should be harmed in such an ideal society. Justice is equality. Nobody shall be treated as more equal or less equal. All are entitled to their basic entitlement because all are human beings, endowed with reasoning, distinct from animals. So as human beings, one human being ought not to be discriminated against another human being. So it is absence of discrimination. It is all are getting equal opportunities and all are having equal treatment under the law. Justice is also a reward for somebody who has given something different, something new, something useful should be rewarded. Please mark this, justice as reward. If you don't reward, then it is injustice. Okay, so justice as reward, justice as inclusion, justice as non-discrimination, justice as opportunity. Just keep these in mind and let's move on. Justice as welfare, everybody to be happy, everybody to be good, everybody's well-being being ensured. Justice as righteousness, being the right conduct. You know, the mystical, what Sainath or others have said, that lead a life where you don't blame anyone, you don't belittle anyone, honor everyone, see God in everyone. So this mystical religious concept. Justice as individual agency. Each one of us has made certain choices, living in certain contexts. So we are individual agents. Our individual agency choice. For example, you are looking at a sex worker and you are saying that she is doing something bad. Her own agency, if you see, she has been compromising with the domestic violence situation. She has no other skill and she becomes vulnerable under a certain situation and her vulnerability gets exploited. So her choice of agency at that moment cannot be disrupted unless she makes you see the way in which she has made the choice and she makes an alternative choice and you enable her to make a choice instead of condemning her or instead of brandishing her. So this kind of understanding of individual agency. Then, utilitarian is justice. Justice simply not an ideal but usefulness which is coming at supplementary to private ethics in the sense that you have to create something useful and once you create something useful you have to reap the benefits of that and when you reap that benefit you have certain choices to monopolize it, to exclude others who did not have this novel idea or bring this utility. Now this is exactly where innovation and human rights conflict comes in. Okay, I am preparing you for understanding that conflict. Now, justice as fairness is the famous concept of John Rawls, who is a great thinker from United States of America, political philosopher, who according to who, justice as fairness is somebody's original position. You are a human being, your original position. Your contractual relationship with the surrounding, maybe with the organization or with the state. So, you being entitled to what your original position gives you. Now, problematic issues are there in John Rawls' concept. So later, Amartya Sen comes out with the idea of justice, in which he says, you know, Amartya Sen, famous Indian economist who was a Nobel laureate, whose theory was about human rights, human development-based understanding of economics, which was an innovative idea. Even in social sciences, we can have innovation. So he got the Nobel Award. Now, Amartya Sen talks about Niti as a set of rules and Nyaya as a process of ensuring the implementation of these rules. So that is law and justice relationship, which he tries to understand from the Indian ancient thinking. Now, private holding, according to this understanding of justice, which John Rawls says, upon which Amartya Sen builds, all of us can have private holdings, and these private holdings have to be protected because you have acquired it with your choice, with your ability, with your hard work. Until you voluntarily give away, those private holdings have to be protected. Now, can we protect any amount of private holding? 91% of the wealth in 9% of people. Now, that is the question that we have to ask when we come to economic justice. Now, against this idea of justice, let us look at two phenomena. One is poverty. The poverty which is evident in the unequal conditions. So, Thomas Nagel, the philosopher, talks about inequality in the world economy now, in the 20th century. What does he say? Just read that quote on the slide. All of you can see, I think, the back, those at the end of the hall also. I'll quote for you. I quote, "The gruesome facts of inequality in the world economy are familiar. Roughly 20% of the world population lives on less than $1 a day, less than 60 rupees a day, and more than 45% live on less than $2 a day, whereas the 15% who live in the high income economies have an average per capita income of $75 a day." So where is 1, where is 2, and where is 75? Latest work figures in the United States of America say some of the CEOs draw 80 times more salary than 90% of the base level workers. Now, how do you justify this kind of inequality? What prevented this large number of base level people from growing into mid level or to the CEO level? What are those conditions? And how do you look at them? So, that is where the inequality is there. Suppose these situations were to be the target of our innovation in science, innovation in technology, innovation in, like the Aadhaar card is one such innovation, whereby you are able to understand and quantify the economic dimensions of poverty or economic well-being. Unless you have quantified them, unless you have structured them, where Amartya Sen himself had advised, and then you bring them into human development index kind of parameters, and then you benchmark their development, you cannot create a good society, a just society, and a welfare of the human being, justice as the ideal to be achieved. Amartya Sen talks about protection of basic human good on the conditioning of capability equality. What is capability? In capability, again, Amartya Sen's analysis is there. There are a lot of criteria which are comparable to the human index, human development index criteria, such as education, such as health, such as opportunity, such as realization of what Maslow calls as hierarchy. I mean, one's self-actualization, opportunity for self-actualization. Now, this is what we call as soft skills in education. You know, they say that your professional success is dependent on your degree and knowledge for 15%. 85% of your success is based on soft skills. So those soft skills are openable where you are not captured in the misery of poverty. According to one analysis, poverty is a web of injustice. Now, what kind of web? Poverty deprives you politically, it deprives you educationally, it deprives you socially, because if you are poor, you can't afford to get a transport, and you are caught in that little shanty town or the slum. Therefore, you are not able to transport yourself to other kinds of possibilities, you know. So, poverty deprives you of opportunity. Therefore, human rights in terms of every human being's original position or original entitlement of self-actualization are the basic concept of justice. They are the principal justice. Human rights as principal justice require recognition of these rights, redistribution. Once again, let's go back to sustainable development goals. Redistribution of these rights and representation of those who are deprived of such rights. So if you are looking at science and technology as innovation being its ultimate possibility of protecting humankind and bringing humankind to justice, then that innovation has to be in terms of representation, recognition and redistribution of such inequilibrium which is there in the society. So how do we gear and how is the situation? How do we look at poverty as a multiple disadvantage to be tackled through innovation? I am giving you only one case study, the case study of right to health. Looking at health as the site of justice, healthcare as a justice in a globalizing world, and healthcare as an attribute of justice as the center of innovation. Just look at how the healthcare is organized. The way the healthcare is organized, you will agree with me that healthcare is one setup. It is $1 billion setup as far as India is concerned, as far as world is concerned. The best of doctors are produced in India, the best of manpower is produced in India, then it is exported or it is improved when it goes abroad. Or within India also, India is 1/7 of the world's population. Within India also there is plenty of jobs created, plenty of opportunities available for a standard healthcare. So if you are looking at healthcare justice and human right to healthcare, then definitely business has an implication for that. Your MBA students, pharmacy has an implication because of its huge implication in terms of innovation related to medicines. Law has an implication in terms of structuring, whether the working of the pharmacy or the hospital or the business enterprise under which the hospital is working. In terms of training the manpower, in terms of protecting the patients, protecting the doctors, lawyers have a role. So I think all discipline students who are assembled here will have huge gain if you understand the core of science and technology, namely innovation, as a human right. So can we travel through that path? Understanding innovation as a human right. Anybody has difficulty so far in understanding? So it's clear with the examples and everything. Now let's go through these cases. I already told you that innovation is the core of science and technology. Innovation has got two arms, namely invention, something of a new finding. Invention is different from discovery. For lawyers, discovery is something that is already naturally occurring, which you unveil. Invention in the form of innovation is that you are adding something useful to the knowledge and which involves your skill and effort. Diamond versus Chakravarti case, the very first case in patenting life forms, where the American Supreme Court said that adding anything useful to the mankind by human ingenuity, anything under the sun can be patentable. That means that innovation involves that kind of invention and utility, usefulness. Now, I am taking the case of pharma patents. Now, if you are looking at pharma patents in terms of new drug discovery, there is a very clear conflict in terms of patients' rights and patent rights. Why patients' right and which patients, what type of patients and how? Is it clear from the back I have given? What if they are poor patients? What if those patients are in the country where there is not enough money to invest in science and technology setup? What if those innovations are not incentivized? What if those innovations are already the monopoly of some corporate which has R&D setup where an eminent scientist is working? So you understand? Now, the contract of that scientist with the organization is monitored by who? By the lawyer. The position of that scientist in terms of promotions, incentives, etc. is monitored by who? The human resources manager or the CEO of the organization, management graduate. What that scientist ought to know, how does that scientist develop the new product? Once again, in my understanding, it's a multidisciplinary arrangement because you develop the demand by looking at the market survey, management expert, marketing expert. You improve the product by using your hardcore science and technology knowledge, the pharmacist. And then, once the product is ready, filing the patent is done by the lawyer in a team of scientists with the patent attorney. And once that patent is filed, after that provisional application, building the prototype, finding the opportunity in the market, once again management expert and industry expert and business advisor. rolling it out and getting it into a brand, adding it to profitability and other kinds of things, and making that brand stand is again the work of the marketing team. So there is a huge commercialization of science within which the knowledge is working. Now, because of this huge investment in R&D and the huge profit margins that they keep, the innovation that a scientist or a pharmacist does comes out as a byproduct. When it reaches the ultimate consumer, it assumes the astronomical proportion in terms of its market value. So the price becomes huge. Is that the price because of the right that the innovator or the inventor is supposed to be protected of? Or is it because of the various marketing forces? I told globalization as global market forces scuttling the justice to the poor consumer that is playing the role. So what is the inherent conflict within this innovator's right, intellectual property right? And one variety of that right is patent right. How you package it, what colors, standardization, trademarks. And then you have the copyright in terms of the literature that you use, the name that you choose. So there are multiple intellectual property rights which are coming into play. But basically, from your context, the most important right is the innovator's right as a pharmacist. Okay, the patent right. So patent versus patent is the huge debate that some of the writers and scholars have engaged with in the human rights area. So from the consumer's point of view, the large number of consumers, maybe about 5 out of 7 in the world, are coming from the poorest part of the world. Take South Africa, take Africa, take South America, so-called Latin America, Asia, Southeast Asia. Now this is where the world's poor are housed. And this is 5 out of 7 people. The 2 people are situated in the United States of America, Canada, Europe, Australia, the richer countries, G7 countries. Now that is the context in which your innovation is finally operating. So access to health of those people who can't afford these medicines, access to medicine as part of access to health, and health as the human right associated with the right to life. Do you get the connection? So don't they have a right to live? And if you, isn't their right to live having precedence over your right to be rewarded for your innovation? Did science evolve as a discipline where you only looked at your profit and your royalty and you engaged in research? No, science is a passion. Innovation, invention is a passion. If you look at J.C. Bose's writings, my one student did research on how Indian Bhatnagar awardees and other scientists lost benefits because they resisted from patenting. They went ahead and published. They published and their article was taken as prior art and the patents were developed on that. C.V. Raman's Raman effect invention today is the basis of cinematography and other technologies, even diffusion, light diffusion theory and other technology, kaleidoscope and so many instrumentations developed on that. How much royalty is Raman Foundation getting? Nothing. How much royalty India is getting? Nothing. Because they published their research before they patented. Okay, so the loss of revenue to the country, the loss of cutting edge innovations, advantage to the economy, which Prime Minister Modi has been harping on, is because of lack of that rights knowledge in the scientist. It's because of the lack of that structuring of the enterprise in such a way that you protect such knowledge. So you have to have a lawyer always, from cradle to the grave. That's where lawyer's role comes in. But lawyer must also understand the dynamic of the market and the way in which you catch that gap with the management scientists. So all departments, experts have to sit together. Interdisciplinarity of interaction is very important. I had the IP cell of Symbiosis International University. When we rolled out first 8 patents, it was a Herculean task to get to have those ideas rolled out, to have experts come together on the table, to envisage the market demand, and also to look at how you are not only looking at profit, but also, for example, we developed a technology related to reading the literature on disability using voice phone technology, and in that, how do you interpret the language? Automatic interpretation of language. Now that's an innovation which has a huge human rights implication, because disability rights of the disabled is one of the human rights conventions. So, or you may be tomorrow developing a technology which is preventing rapes, which will create a kind of app, and that app will be alerting the police chief or there will be sudden forces deployed to protect you from that kind of attack. Now that is an innovation which has a huge implication for safety. So this is where innovation driving to that segment of the society where rights are being violated. So I am just giving you this background to understand how you understand innovation. So if I am doing drug discovery, how do I set the agenda for drug discovery is one point. Second is, what are the issues? Now I'll tell you, ICT now, privacy issue is there. Aadhaar card itself has been a huge butt of debate. You all will agree with me that I am parting with my data. I don't know where my data is deposited. I am also told that this data is stored by a company which is outsourced by United States, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. So am I being surveilled by somebody sitting in the United States of America? Somebody is keeping a watch on my cornea, genetic information. Isn't that very private to me? Because my skin color, my eye is something that is my own information. It's my body information, and that's integral to my personality, my identity. It's like somebody peeping into my nude body. It's that intimidating. So I don't know who is doing this. Where is this data being parked? So ICT has raised the issue of privacy, which is also part of right to bodily integrity, which is part of right to life. Okay. Second issue. I was watching a television program many years ago where one of the leading drug manufacturing companies of Germany was selling its cough syrup in Haiti because these children were suffering from the cough due to the volcanic ash, because Haiti is having burning volcano. I don't know how many of you have watched these discovery programs. And you must watch science and technology, whichever discipline you belong to, because it is really interesting and it belongs to us. It is our knowledge, So Haiti children, the lawyers prepared their claim that because this was pushed to the Haiti children through the pharmaceutical agencies, and prescribing doctors were being taken to conferences and given incentives, these children were showing slowness in studies because it was interfering with their brain processes. These children were hyperactive. They were engaging in criminal, juvenile, delinquent behavior. So connecting the two in terms of tort law and seeking compensation for imposing something which was creating social disequilibrium and disruption was something that lawyers were developing as a tort cause of action, seeking compensation. Third example I want to give you is the latest example which has been making news, as Sir told about clinical trials. I don't want to name the company, one of the leading companies. It conducted a clinical trial, and the clinical trial results were manipulated, and the drug was related to dealing with childhood depression. Even small children suffer from depression. And this drug was passed in the clinical trial. Later on, there were a number of suicidal cases. And the company went on denying. After it had to pay millions of dollars of compensation, and there was a lot of public outcry, state intervened, and in the United States of America and in the United Kingdom, when the investigations was done, it was very clear that clinical trials were manipulated. Signatures were false, fraud. So now the drug has been called off shelf. After all these bad experiences, more than 3,000 children committed suicide. So because it interferes with the brain process. The other case is the thalidomide case. All of you know. Anybody knows about the thalidomide case? Yes. How many? Yeah. Thalidomide was this morning sickness related drug which women used to consume to abate the morning sickness, resulted in delivering babies who were born without limbs, who forever became spastic or bedridden, and the parents went on class litigation. Class litigation. It was a mass tort. Later on, thalidomide was not withdrawn from the market. It was withdrawn as a morning pill, but morning sickness drug. But it was used for some other skin-related disorder because it was supposed to have leprosy-curing properties. Now, what kind of drugs are we developing? How irresponsibly we are developing? How imprecise are our results? What is our ethics committee doing? So, after Helsinki Declaration, which came out, there is a lot of awareness about clinical trials. So, clinical trial philosophy in Helsinki Declaration is where the risks outweigh the benefit. The careful analysis of risk-benefit and the background documentation the proper clinical trial. So in the ethics committee, you have the ethicist, means philosopher, you have the lawyer, you have the management expert, you have people who are experts in that area. At least 1/3 should be, means if you're testing pharmaceutical product, then you have to have at least 1/3 of the people who are experts and seniors in that field, for example. So this is how we have tried to regulate it as ethicists and lawyers. We have another interesting case of GM crops. In India, GM crops is a big controversy. This is an agriculture's example. Beta brinjal and beta cotton are the varieties which are developed by manipulating the RNA technology, rDNA technology, ribosomal DNA technology, whereby you will be, there was a time when in ancient grafting, what did we do? White colored rows and red colored rows, we used to bring the buds and we used to graft them and we used to develop a pink color row. Today, thereafter we went to cell line kind of hybridoma technology, hybridizing the cell lines, isolating in the lab. Today, we don't want to hybridize cell lines because we have gone ahead with the recombinant DNA technology. Now, what is this recombinant DNA technology? Instead of taking cell line A, cell line B, I take cell line A and I manipulate the DNA within that. On the DNA, I lodge a particular gene related with a particular property and then create the recombinant DNA. So, there are tomato, sour flower tomato. These tomatoes will have highest shelf life because they have a fish gene inserted into it. What about vegetarians? So we have examples of beta cotton and beta brinjal, where the pest killing property related virus acts as a vector, and on that, with that virus, the recombinant DNA is developed, whereby now you don't have to spray the pesticide. This plant itself has got poisonous property to keep the pests away. It kills the pests. If it can kill the pest, what about the bacteria in the intestinal flora? The bacteria which are essential to see that you don't have digestive disorders. What happens to these? Will they get digested in the body? So this is where it was okay. Even in cotton case, there were a lot of problems. The cattle got killed. The field did not have manure, because farming in India was always looking at a plant as not as a fragmented fruit, berry, market-related product, commercial product. We always looked at a plant as an environmental gift. So the unused part of the plant went back to the nature biodegradably and it formed the fertilizer. Now with the beta cotton technology, the cattle which consumed these plants got killed. The land became toxic. And the super weeds developed because genes jumped species. From beta cotton they went to the weed. The weed was stronger than the crop. So the yield was not as it was projected. So field trials of beta cotton is attributed to a lot of farmer suicides in Vidarbha and northern Karnataka region as well. That is one human right violation by technology in the agriculture field. It was not technology per se. It was management of technology, lack of proper data, lack of proper information, lack of public information, and making vulnerable poor farmers to buy your idea without proper training and orientation. But when they came to beta brinjal, Minister Jairam Ramesh put his foot down and he said that beta brinjal is not going to be field tried or not going to be introduced to India. So the Ministry of Environment and the think tank on genetic engineering are at a quagmire because it's a consumable food crop. It's a horticultural crop. So this is where we stand. There are many stories which I can give you. The last example I want to give you is the knowledge of the indigenous people about a crop or about an art or about any way of doing agriculture or indigenous medicines, how this knowledge is pirated, how this knowledge by scientists, visiting sociologists and scientists in the name of cultural studies is taken and then it is smuggled. You know, African berries which were carried in the pockets of these professors who came from Toledo University later resulted in diabetic diet substitute, sugar substitute, the Kemfe, which was 500 times sweeter than sugar, but did not have any kind of damaging properties like how insulin, artificial insulin would have. Indigenous cell lines, which like Maasai tribe in Nigeria, who had the cell line which was immune to certain diseases. So their cell lines were stealthily taken during the blood test, and those cell lines were cultured in the lab, and human insulin was developed out of Maasai cell lines. it was in the Moore versus Regent case that on behalf of such patients whose cell lines were taken and drugs were developed based on the cell line, like humulin and all, who were brought to the court and had to pay millions of dollars as compensation for piracy of genetic information. So, piracy of genetic information, piracy of indigenous people's knowledge, piracy of local knowledge in order to make huge profits is also considered as violation of human rights. Because your traditional knowledge is not only your knowledge, it's your identity. So this is where human rights are violated. So the other problem is we know that per acre yield of genetically engineered crop or hybrid variety is 50 kilos, whereas traditional variety is 20 kilos. So I go on planting the high yielding variety and my field becomes toxic. After few years, no yield at all, and my neighboring fields also get genetically contaminated, because in nature it doesn't say you are the paid farmer who has borrowed or bought the seeds under cooperative loan from this seed company. So Percy Schreimer case you will have on the YouTube if you go. Percy Schreimer was the farmer in Canada whose field got genetically contaminated because in the neighborhood the company's crop was growing. Which company? Monsanto. So Monsanto sued him because his seeds, the seeds from his plants, showed the characteristics which the Monsanto had sold to the neighborhood plant. I mean, they sued Schreimer. Is it his fault that in nature genes jump species or cross-pollination occurs? Can you prevent cross-pollination because you didn't pay and they paid? It was a bizarre logic, you know. So Percy Schreimer won his case successfully against Monsanto company for their unjust case. So Vandana Shiva and I will talk about this. Go to YouTube. I have got those videos I can share with you. So those will indicate. So one of the ways in which United Nations Organization resolved this problem was by the Rio Summit in 1992, under which the Biodiversity Convention was signed. Biodiversity Convention gave one idea of access and benefit sharing. So if I am accessing your country's resources or your indigenous people's resources, then we should have an agreement. The agreement by which certain parts of the profit which I earn by developing a viable commercial product, let us say a drug from a tree or something, you know, you all must be knowing. How was paracetamol developed? How was quinine developed? You know, quinine, anti-malarial drug. Paracetamol, antipyretic drug. How were they developed? You know, rainforest, South American rainforest, Latin American rainforest, the region called Andes Mountains. Scientists go there and they watch feverish jaguars eating the bark of a tree. And the tribals see that, and tribals adopt it. They make the concoction, kashayam, kada, out of it. And they heal their fevers looking at the jaguars. See how original knowledge develops. So over the centuries it gets refined, it gets developed. Now scientists visit, befriend these along with sociologists who can speak the language and who live like them, eat like them, and get this knowledge. So then this knowledge translates into pharma companies who isolate the molecules which are responsible for reducing the fever. Thus was born acetyl salicylic acid. And what is that? What is acid? Yes. Similarly, quinone, you know, anti-malarial drug was developed by watching these tribal people looking at feverish, you know, cold, chilled fever kind of symptoms, and then how they were using a different bark. So looking at all these kinds of experiments, the lab synthesizes the molecule and then it artificially synthesizes this molecule. First you isolate and then you artificially synthesize. Then you mass produce. We call it as Fordization of life. Means, you know, Henry Ford, who first developed cars for everybody. Just like that we develop drugs for everybody, medicines for everybody. It served one purpose, all right. But it also defeated another purpose when we did not do justice to the original stewards of this knowledge. So that is what I am trying to highlight. So I think with the limitation, I will just give you two examples, best practices. One is IN Merck Bio model, which was the model of Merck company, which signed up with the IN Bio department of Costa Rican University to look at the rainforests of Costa Rica and isolate molecules. Some of these molecules were also transferred to the Boots company for cosmetic production. You know, Boots company, everybody will know, best nature-friendly, hypoallergenic products. These all came from nature's basket. So that was one best practice whereby royalties were shared, whereby capability from the company was transferred to the institutes, university. So it's a good MOU model. Second model is the Jivani drug, which was developed out of the tribals in the Nilgiri forest hill practice, where the tribals wouldn't eat a meal, they would eat 4 leaves. So, and they were very slim. So looking at them, the sociologists and scientists who were doing the trekking with them tried to isolate the knowledge, and they developed, and they made the tribal society, cooperative society, to be the benefit sharers with them for every pack of drug that was sold. Now, when you are looking at science, technology and innovation, there is an author of Indian origin, S.R. Mukherjee, who says that human rights in relation to science can be about the policy which impacts energy, there is some spell error, energy production, climate change, freshwater access, biological warfare, and then public health and gender issues. You know, one of the interesting ecofeminist argument comes from Vandana Shiva's book on ecofeminism, where she talks about 2 issues. One is the subsistence people, the women, the way they protect the forest, the Chipko movement and others. The Gadwali women who protected the Gadwal region's biodiversity. There is also Deccan Development Society in Andhra, which has preserved traditional rice varieties, you know, against the onslaught of corporate seeds. Another example she takes is from Japan, where there is a club called Saikatsu Club, where the women swore that they will breastfeed their children. They will not go for breastfeed substitutes. So she said how children were healthy, how mothers were able to job share, means 6 weeks in the beginning they were giving attendance to the children, how it prevented a lot of onset of diseases later in the life. So woman's own choice, we said agency, you know, own choice, own decision making was protected by being natural mothers, by being, by taking messages from the nature. So ecofeminism is that kind of feminist approaches to life which is nature friendly. So that is just an example. Now, whether technology can replace human element, if it replaces, what will happen? So the innovation has to look at those ideas as well, that innovation cannot create unemployment, it can new skills being developed so that human element is not ruled out. It will create social imbalance. Now, this is one side. Now let's go to the other side. You are creating the technology. What is my right as far as that technology is concerned? There are human rights of 2 types. One is every human being's right to reap the benefits of science. That means that science and technology innovations have to be diffused. They have to be spread wide. They have to be known. So all of us as others, as consumers, and you as creators, and companies as providers have the duty to provide this knowledge to everybody. Now what does that providing knowledge indicate? Your right as the corporate for sponsoring the R&D, for paying this scientist or innovator, can it override my right to health, to have access to that medicine, to have the knowledge of that, to afford that? So 4 elements: affordability, access, getting the correct kind of information, ability to make the right, I mean you should facilitate me to make the decision. And the last one is trained manpower, safety and trained manpower. Means pharmacist dispensing the pharma product with the safe instructions. Like for example in the United States of America, there's a very clear guideline about spellos of pharmaceutical products. In India, you order on the phone and somebody sends you the drug. I mean, this happens in Pune many a times, that A and O are pronounced alike in some regions of India. Suppose you call over the phone and you pronounce A as O, because they say that in some languages, apples are pronounced as oranges, isn't it? So A and O. So this confusion results in the pharmacist sending you the kind of drug which matches with that pronunciation. Now, can you dispense based on telephone call? And is there a style guide? One of my students has done a study on that. There is no style guide on spellos, and those spellos being related, because in pharmacy the naming process is on the core code, and that core code and the spellings alteration does not have any rationality beyond that core code. Whereas in the United States of America, everything is very clearly put in the naming guideline. So in India, there is a dire need for proper naming guideline in terms of right to know, right to freedom of choice, patient's right in terms of affordability and safety. Very important, safety. Because safety is associated with life. If it is unsafe, then it can react in allergies or reactions which can even be life-threatening. So do you understand now how patient rights and patent rights are correlated in terms of science and technology innovation, particularly in the case of pharmaceutical products? This will also mean it will have implications for telecommunication and climate change. So the two important human rights articles is Article 27 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 15 of the Covenant on Economic and Social and Cultural Rights. Right of everyone to share, to know scientific advancement and its benefit, universal right of authors or creators of knowledge, means the scientists. Today not scientists, earlier it was scientists who were holed up in their lab, in the basement of their house. Today it's not scientists, it is employees of big R&D setup of a mega corporation. So right of those creators or their employers for material interests resulting from their innovation. Now that is where we lawyers come. We say that the shared patent, co-holders, co-patent holders, we define that, lawyers define that. So that is where lawyers, scientists, managers, CEOs sit together and determine the policy. Now you get it. There is no wonder that in Sandip University you all are assembled in the same hall because your interests are mutually protected if you work as a team, as an interdisciplinary team. So the major imbalance in pharma innovation was discovered by WHO way back in the mid-90s. And after that, WHO, in the idea of evergreening of patents, same drug, they will patent once, and with the little variation on utility, they will patent twice. We had this famous case, that tryptophan is a variety of protein. So you patent the plant variety, and after that you patent a plant variety which can synthesize tryptophan proteins for those who are protein deficient. So same core generic patent, and you create evergreening patent with a different type of utility. Maybe a slight change. You call it as tea chickpea, something tryptophan enriched chickpea. So this is the disaster in the patent protection, strongest patent protection which is visible in the United States of America. So there is an inherent conflict between manufacturers, which is a company usually, manufacturer's goal and the patient's goal, and the ability to pay, the awareness to know, the education, the trained manpower. Therefore, today that is one issue. So 10% of the research in pharma companies only supports 90% of the stillborn children. Why? Because children are stillborn in what kind of communities? Poorest of the communities. They can't afford to buy these medicines. So if you are investing as a company on the R&D facility related to that, how will you recover the money? So that is one. How will you recover your investment? Then in that case, who can support the company? Maybe the governments. Because ultimately healthcare is a human right. So government has the duty to protect healthcare. So this is one way of balancing it. I am not saying everything is wrong with the companies, but I am looking at it from the point of view of companies. One-sided thinking has to be somehow balanced. The second way of balancing was done in the Doha round of WTO negotiations. You are studying WTO, some of you? WTO negotiation. So Doha declaration, what did it say? It said that the promotion of public health should not be defeated by IP. By intellectual property or patents, you should not assert it in such a way that promotion of public health is defeated. If you look at the inventions related to HIV, there is a very small percentage of invention. HIV drugs are costing a bomb. That's where Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation came in. Nations had to be organized at the central level. Even in India, NACO is there, National AIDS Control Corporation, as a public-private organization through which Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation pumped in money, and distribution of condoms and ART drugs, etc. were given. Because of which lot of HIV alleviation was possible. So this kind of science policy change, drug control, drug distribution policy change can help. The other is compulsory licensing. Now one of the worries that we have is the investment in non-communicable diseases. So far investment has been in vaccine. Most of the pharma companies are investing a lot in vaccine. What about non-communicable diseases? India is going to be, already it is called as a diabetic capital. Cancer, because of a large population and the stress, cancer is one, and also careless way of handling chemicals and pesticides and water. Third is obesity. Obesity is because of the lifestyle changes that Indians are undergoing. Now in this context, the Doha Declaration said that wherever public health is there, you have to protect public health and there has to be some concession made. So compulsory licensing was one that was suggested. Now if you look at Indian Constitution, you've got two conflicting provisions. One is freedom of speech and expression provision. Clause in Article 19 which talks about 7 different types of freedom, of which freedom of trade and profession is one of the freedoms. Can I force you to, as a pharmaceutical company, can I force you to develop a drug which as a state I want because I have high percentage of diabetic patients, I have high percentage of obesity patients? No. On the other hand, as the state, right to health is embedded within right to life as unenumerated right. Can I put right to life below freedom of trade? Is trade better than right to life or priority over right to life? It's very clear that in the constitutional scheme of rights, right to life is the supreme right. There is an inherent hierarchy of rights. So if you put right to life, then trade is an option. You can even live without trade by doing service, by being at the charity of the state, by pooling resources. But you cannot have trade unless you live. So within the patent rights, a company's right to trade and profession vis-a-vis a patient's right to survive, between the two, definitely you have to make patient's right to life as supreme. So my argument, in the line of most of the human rights advocates, is that today WHO talks about essential drug list. Most of these essential drugs are very, very expensive. If it is essential, how can it be expensive? How can it not be afforded? How can it not be given access to? Why it has become expensive? Either poorer countries like African countries and countries like Asian countries do not have patent developed indigenously, or because the patents are elsewhere and they become expensive. So at least drug discovery research, if it focuses on WHO's essential drug list, then it could do a lot of good to the poorer parts of the world. Second is the broken distribution. Even if it is produced elsewhere in the world, life-saving drug, by the time it arrives here, it turns out expensive or it comes in the black market. Cancer drugs, for example. Then, if science as a human rights avenue is about giving access to knowledge and diffusing its benefit, with which I started my talk, and about knowledge distribution, then there should be a way of ensuring that right to life of the patient takes precedence over right to profit of the patent. That is the argument. So, in innovation also, we have to look at collaboration between pharmaceutical companies and the government, R&D facilities to be shared, incentives to be given. We should not obstruct IP, but IP should not obstruct life. IP should not obstruct public health promotion, because human rights are timeless, human rights are inherent, we are born with it. Whereas patent is something that is acquired, it's a property. We have created a property out of it. So the property logic and life logic, long ago in our constitution we have given up right to property as a fundamental right. We have made it a right subservient to public interest. Similarly, intellectual property right or patent has to be subservient to public interest. That is the argument. The supremacy of science and protection of scientific knowledge evolved at a time when science was considered as a public interest in itself, as a public good. Today scientist is not autonomous. Today scientist is controlled by cross commercial organization. It is where scientist is seen as an employee. Therefore, scientist's own human right also is endangered in the name of aggressive search for patent. So it is here that the human rights argument talks that look at the standard of living and don't keep huge profit margin. And they talk about how state has to balance between innovator's right and the public health. Now in this context, I would like to give you two stories. One story is cryopreservation of embryos. Do you understand what is this? Preserving the embryos in -80 degrees centigrade. These embryos are generated in the human body in vitro or in vitro with the intervention of artificial in vitro fertilization or artificial reproductive techniques. Now, if you are preserving these embryos, is that embryo a product or is it a human being? What is the meaning of a human being? Should a human being be a thinking, walking, conscious, mobile being, or a blueprint of a human being? Or preconceptual human embryo can also be a human being? Now, if you say preconceptual human embryo is not a human being and there is no human right in that embryo, again scientific innovation, then you are doing lot of damage. There is a very intricate human rights argument here that that embryo is life. That embryo is going to fulfill the right to family, which is part of right to meaningful life. And right to family, which is part of meaningful life of a couple who suffer from infertility. And they have this as the right, fundamental human right to benefit from science. And the benefit of science is to have the possibility of curing infertility through this discovery of in vitro fertilization technique or the artificial reproductive technique. So you get the connection? So do you think preconception human embryo has human rights or not? It has human rights. It has human right to name, human right to identity, human right to confidentiality, human right to privacy. Once it is placed in the uterus of some person, it gets all the rights under the Child Rights Convention, right to parenthood, right to know the parenthood. For all that purposes, this embryo may not be a product of two people. It could be a product of 6 different types of possibility. What are those 6 different types of possibility? The biological parents, the surrogate parent, the one of the gametes, means male gamete, let us say semen, has been taken from some other parent, not the biological parent, not the husband of the biological mother. So 6 different possibilities exist in vitro fertilization or artificial reproductive technology. Now this child has been conceived in United States of America, let's imagine, or surrogacy is not allowed everywhere. Commercial surrogacy is very, very regulated. So, and in India now it is abandoned, which is a stupid thing because infertility is increasing in India. If this child is brought to India and after some years this child goes back to the United States of America, falls in love with some other person, and that person happens to be quarter father or quarter sister or half sister of this person, will there be consanguinity? Family law students, consanguinity is prohibited degrees of relationship. In India there will be honor killing for that, because they do not know the information about their parenting. So, right to know the parent. So, embryonic rights are something for which there is no guideline as of now, but then these considerations have come before the court and lot of litigations have been fought. I am giving you the citation, Peter Yu, it's available on Google, 2016, please read that. I can't go into the details, I can go on the whole day because there is so much of scope for discussion of science, innovation and human rights. So, second story I want to give you. That means innovation should keep everybody on equal footing, whether the human child, biological child or embryonic child of IVF. There is no difference. That equal footing is principle of equality, rule of law, justice. Okay? So let me come to the second one. Polio vaccine was discovered by a scientist called Salk. Salk did not want to patent it. True to his surmise, one of the non-governmental organizations, understand, it's not only companies, non-governmental organizations, created the cases of those children who became paralyzed because of injecting this vaccine. So he was blacklisted, castigated, but then he could not be impoverished because he did not claim any royalty. He did not want to patent it because he thought that this was a great discovery for the welfare of the humanity. Soon after that, in 6 years, another scientist came up, Sabin. He also did not want to patent his product. This time, it was oral vaccine. Now, he did not create anything new, that's why he did not want to patent, in addition to respecting the philosophy of Salk. Now, between the two, whatever they have developed has eradicated polio, nearly eradicated polio, you can say, from the map of the world. But the threat of paralysis of handling this live vaccine is always there. I don't know how many of you are mothers or fathers who have handled a child who has been through the polio oral vaccine. All these Rotary campaigns and other campaigns, polio vaccine campaigns by governments and all, do they properly inform that this vaccine is a live vaccine and you have to handle with the glove when the child is, let us say, going for toilet? Because the vaccine can come through the body of the child and it can paralyze if it enters your bloodstream. This was the kind of warning we were given in Ireland and other places when we were handling children. So, proper information and the background of drug discovery are very important to come to the knowledge of the public. Most of us think that this is the area of scientists. No, it is also area of publicists. People like us, jurists, lawyers, students, youth. So awareness and knowledge are power for youth. Therefore, now they are talking about pharma patenting to be compulsory in less developed countries through the WTO. It is a double-edged weapon. It is good for us because it may make the rates cheaper. But it is bad for us if we were forced to take the global patent. You know, patent cooperation treaty. You patent in one country, you can automatically patent in patent cooperation treaty member countries, where it can become expensive also. So the mechanism we have found with the Novartis case with the Delhi High Court Justice Ravindra Bhatt's judgment, who based it upon constitutional guarantee of right to life, is compulsory licensing. So that Gleevec vaccine, Gleevec drug for cancer treatment is now costing 1/4 of its price, thanks to this judgment. So courts intervene and they set the balance right. Therefore, when there is global harmonization of IP because of globalization, we have to temper IP, we have to tone down IP's aggressive trade interests and patent protection by human rights argument. And this human rights argument extends to corporate social responsibility as well, where companies have to protect human rights within of the scientists and other employees, and human rights outside in terms of their responsibility towards the community and the patients at large and public health as a cause. So as Einstein said, religion without science is blind, science without religion is lame, human rights is the new religion for science. Thank you very much for your attention.